If you read Esther chapter 4, what you have is a back and forth between these two people using media, right? These servants, these messengers. And they're taking notes and letters back and forth. So Mordecai and Esther are never in the same room for this very important conversation. And you're going to see that Mordecai strikes a tone that's a little bit on edge. And Esther, who actually the book is named after and is the real hero of the book of Esther, she starts to find her own voice. So this is a powerful chapter. So we decided to do it in a more dramatic way. One other thing to note is that I will have up on the screen text from Esther. So you know where I'm getting this. But we're using our theological imaginations. We're allowed sometimes as we read Scripture to read between the lines and read it creatively. That's how we enter into the text. We want to understand this world and the drama behind it. So that's what we're attempting to do. What have I done? Haven't my people and I suffered enough? We've been divided, we've been defeated, we've been exiled, shamed, and disowned by our God. How long will our enemies keep their feet on our throats? How long? No, I am not to fault for this edict. Haman, that genocidal pig, is to blame. He struts about with honor he doesn't deserve. He draws blood for false gods and a gluttonous king. Haman is the prince of Persia, the demon of death, the accuser of the Jews. My refusal to bow has only hastened his plot. He rages like the nations. He plots in vain. The one seated in the heavens will get the last laugh. Honor will come to his anointed one. Someday, and that day of the Lord must come soon, it must come before year's end. The God of Passover must sweep through the city again and avenge his ransomed people. Then new mercies will come in the morning, every morning. But this is daytime, and it's dark. Evil covers the heavens like clouds. Night's coming, and it may linger. God is hidden, silent, and we have sinned. Perhaps if we return to him, if we come to him with weeping, fasting, and mourning, then he will hear us. Perhaps if we rend our evil hearts, not just our garments, like the prophet Joel instructed, then he will break the silence and bash Haman's head against a rock. The Lord is merciful and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. Who knows what he will do despite what I have done? I will tear my garments. I will weep, fast, and mourn. I will parade my misery before my people so they may join me in returning to God.
The air changed in Susa overnight. Xerxes had summoned the scribes. The officials and noblemen were murmuring, something about Haman, something about blood. I could feel a chill in my chambers. Then I heard the clamor of cantering horses. At first, I feared a military attack, but other sounds of war, soldiers marching, chariots racing, steel and bronze clanging, didn't follow. The hoofbeats eventually receded. This was a postal dispatch. King Xerxes had sent a royal edict to the ends of the earth. They made haste. Throughout the day, my attendants kept their distance. They whispered to each other as they stood on opposite sides of the room. The eunuchs looked concerned. They looked at me with concern. I bid one of my attendants to my side. I said, "Something is amiss. What has disturbed our blessed Susa? What have you, these women, and king concealed from your queen? Beautiful queen, the king has issued a decree that will exterminate a certain enemy. These enemies are among us. Many people in our city weep. People in every province weep. The official with whom you often consult, Mordecai, he weeps too. In fact, he has torn his clothes and stands outside the gate in sackcloth and ashes." I gasped and then pressed my hand over my mouth. "Mordecai," I muttered in disbelief. "Yes, Mordecai," the attendant repeated. What made Mordecai weep? Had he enraged the king? How could he present himself like this, so desperate, I wondered. King Xerxes told me little of his affairs. His initial favor from 5 years ago had cooled. He had not summoned me since Adar, nearly a month ago. I spent more time with my eunuchs, attendants, and other women from the harem than with my own husband. I spent more time at my winter estate, surrounded by servants, but feeling isolated. My life lacked no comforts or responsibilities. What it lacked was intimate relationships and purpose. I needed to hear from Mordecai, but I couldn't speak to him in his current state, or mine for that matter. A sense of dread had set in. I sent for an aide. I gave him these orders: collect new garments for Mordecai and deliver them to him. Tell him they are a gift from the queen. Order him to remove his sackcloth.
Other Jews have joined my demonstration. The edict has brought us out of hiding. We are no longer inconspicuous, no longer comfortable. We stand out with our tear-streaked faces and itchy garments. Not every Jew has exposed his or her identity. I just received word from Queen Esther to change my clothes. Official word from the queen. I refuse. In a former lifetime, Queen Esther was Hadassah, my cousin and fellow Jew. In a former lifetime, I told her to hide her identity to win the favor of King Xerxes. The plan worked. It worked too well. It worked the Jewishness right out of her blood. She is Queen Esther, Queen of Persia. She may be able to hold back her Jewish tears, but unless something changes, she will shed her Jewish blood. If we die together. The thought of it makes me weep. I've already lost my cousin. She's dead to me, but if she makes known her Jewish identity, Haman will make sure she's dead to all. No, I can't take her royal garments. This loss grieves me too much. I'll send them back to her. I'll order her eunuch away.
My aide returned, a bundle of clothes in his arms. Beautiful Queen Esther, Mordecai has resisted your request. Get rid of the garments and fetch me Hathach. The eunuch disappeared. Minutes later, Hathach arrived. He was the chief eunuch Xerxes gave to oversee my care. Beautiful queen, he said, what will you have me do? Go to Mordecai. Tell him I received his message, but insist he explains his meaning. I shall return soon, Hathach said, bowing. I watched him enter the hallway and fade into the shadows. I had time. I could wait.
When I see her eunuch striding toward me, I know Esther has sent him. Hathach, a living symbol of Xerxes' excess, an emasculated slave dedicated to polishing the king's trophy bride, who herself is a slave of sorts. The very sight of Hathach makes me wince. Master Mordecai, the queen sends me. Is this for the refusal of her clothes, I reply. No, she accepts your public display of affliction, but insists you explain it. Explain what? Your sackcloth, your ashes, your wallowing. Isn't it obvious I spit? I assume anyone would be horrified by an edict to destroy, kill, and annihilate all of the Jews, the young and old, the males and females, across the Persian Kingdom. Of all people, I would expect Queen Esther to find this news troubling. The eunuch's expression remains placid. She does know about the edict, doesn't she? I ask. Not all the details, no. Furious, I pull a copy of the decree from my belt that I had ripped off the wall earlier. Though it will do Esther little good, her being illiterate, I press the parchment into his hand. Then I insist you tell her my meaning. This is the edict authored by Haman and endorsed by the king. The genocide of the Jews has been put into motion. This is proof. Time is running out for our people. Queen Esther must act. Time is running out. Hathach nods. His face betrays no sign of picking up on my slip of the tongue. Our people, the Jewish people, the heritage Queen Esther and I share. The eunuch bows and cuts across the open square toward the citadel.
What news do you bring? I asked, my voice raised. I addressed Hathach as soon as he entered my chamber. My beautiful queen, I have sobering news from Mordecai. The king has issued a decree to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, the young and old, males and females, in every province in Persia. Upon hearing this report, I could hardly breathe. Blood rushed from my face. I felt faint. I watched in disbelief as Hathach unrolled a piece of parchment. It was inscribed with lettering from different languages. I could read none of them. My eunuch continued, the Jews are enemies of the king. They reject his laws. Haman has acted on the king's behalf to bring about their execution. He will pay for this campaign with the plunder of the Jewish people. It has been decreed. Beautiful queen, this has caused the uproar. This is what makes Mordecai weep. He weeps for his people. At this point, Hathach took my hand and helped me to a chair. He called for an attendant to bring me a drink. Another came with a fan to wave before my ashen face. I took a sip of wine, swallowed, and began to cry. When my tears subsided, Hathach spoke again. Apparently, there is no small population of Jews within the city. Until this point, they have blended in. Not today. Today, in the courts and beyond the walls, their sorrow has unmasked them. He paused, inspecting me. You weep too, beautiful queen. Is that a question? I asked. My servants stepped back. They were clearly uncomfortable with their beautiful queen looking less than glamorous. Anguish ruins even the most beautiful of faces. It strips off the veneer and exposes our vulnerability. Perhaps my Persian facade showed Jewish cracks. Wiping my eyes, I muttered, "Such bloodshed grieves me. Senseless violence is a waste." Composed, I stood up. My servants scattered. Hathach remained. One more thing, beautiful queen. Mordecai said you must act. He commands you to go to the king, beg his favor, and plead with him on behalf of your people. Mordecai commanded the queen? He did. He called them your people, Hathach added. My people. Yes, beautiful queen. Hathach met my eyes momentarily before looking down. He knew my secret. Mordecai had practically spelled it out for him. I could sense his discomfort. His feet shifted. He steadied his shoulders and said, "You are the queen of Persia. You speak for all the people. The kingdom is yours." Yes, it's mine except for the king's inner court. If any man or woman enters without King Xerxes' invitation, the punishment is death. I haven't been invited for a month. Mordecai knows this law. Tell him he commands my death. Unless the king extends his golden scepter, I'm sure to die. I will tell him. As Hathach went away, I pressed my hand over my hammering heart. The mixture of emotions, sorrow, betrayal, fear, and rage, had a dizzying effect. I returned to my chair and reclined, lest I pass out. Within moments, my world had come unraveled.
My head throbs, my skin itches, my stomach aches with hunger. Mourning is not for weaklings. Fasting isn't for the faint of heart. I've taken pains to get Esther's attention. It's working. I see her chief eunuch cross the courtyard toward me. "You relayed my news. You gave her my command?" I asked. Hathach nods. "And?" "She refused," Hathach said. "Refused? Why?" "She called it a death wish. No one enters the king's inner court without an invitation. The law decrees their death. Surely you don't want your queen to die." I can't tell if he's making a statement or asking a question. His tone is flat. What I do know is that Esther's crown no longer masks her Jewish blood. Hathach has a tell. He avoids my eyes, looking down. Yes, Hathach knows Esther's a Jew. This is leverage. I roll the dice and say, Tell Queen Esther, don't think yourself that in the king's palace you will escape more than any of the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Hathach receives my words, half threat, half bet, and heads back to the queen.
I listened to Hathach. His report disturbed me. Mordecai revealed my Jewish identity. Mordecai predicted my death. My cousin and adoptive father outed me and hung me out to dry. Was I safe or not? Was I necessary or not? Where else would relief and deliverance come from? We used to believe our help comes from the Lord. What about here? What about now? What about this moment? For such a time as this, Mordecai said. Something about this phrase, oblique as it may be, made my spine tingle. Hairs on my arm stood up. for such a time as this. This moment, these people, this place, now. A phrase from Moses suddenly came to mind. God has numbered our days. Death is inevitable. Sooner or later, we all face it. We never know that moment. But this moment, the here and now, we know intimately, for such a time as this. Our past is done, our future is predetermined. It's only the present we can shape, for such a time as this. Mordecai's right. One way or another, I will die, but I will not die as a silent bystander. I will not die without a fight. I will not let the certainty of death rob me of the possibilities of living and giving life to many, for such a time as this. These thoughts flooded my head as Hathach awaited my reply. Mordecai's words evoked in me a renewed determination to live fully and faithfully. I spoke. Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Hathach gathered a few other servants to pass along my instructions to Mordecai. As I watched them leave, I noticed the weight on my shoulders had lifted. My lungs filled with rich gulps of air. I rose from my chair and stood tall. I was no longer taking orders, but giving them. I had come out of hiding, determined to face my destiny. I was living, at least for now. I was living for such a time as this.
Hathach returns with an entourage. My gambit worked. My cousin and queen has agreed to petition King Xerxes. She may have sealed her fate. She knows this. I know this. Desperate times call for determined actions. In 3 days' time, Queen Esther will enter the king's presence unbidden. She may die. If she doesn't go, we'll all be dead by year's end. The countdown has begun. So now we wait. We wait and fast. Every Jew, young and old, male and female, for 3 days straight. We wait and fast and pray. Who knows what God might do?